Welcome everyone. In this video I'm going to show you how to model the seat of this bar stool, which was requested by Gabriel, and I hope everyone else would also like to learn a little bit about how to do this. This is going to be using surfacing because as far as I can see that's the only way you're going to be able to make that kind of shape. I've sketched out a top view and a front view of what I think this seat looks like because I don't have an actual reference, and I've clipped these out and I've saved them as PNG image files. So let's hop across to Solidworks and get started. Right, I'm in a new part file and I'm going to start with the top plane and create a sketch. And if I go to the tools bar and I go down to sketch tools, right near the very bottom you can see a command called sketch picture. This will take you to whatever your last entered file location is, and mine in this case is where I store my images for you guys. We could also do it in the search commands bar, but I'll show that to you for the next view. So I'm going to go to my seat top view, and you'll notice that the sketch gets brought in with the left hand corner corresponding to the origin point. And then if I zoom out, let's just get this, you'll see this blue line, and this blue line you need to be careful not to use it for anything other than to scale the drawing with. Okay, so it's got no other function than to help you to get this sketch that you've created to the right scale. So I'm going to drag the left hand side of the sketch across to the left hand side of my picture, and then I'm going to drag the right hand side to this edge where it is, which would be the limit of my sketch, and I get this dialog box, this dimension dialog box, in which I'm going to enter 400 because that's what I want, and I'm going to say OK. And so what that's done is it's just scaled the drawing up or down so that this drawing from that point to that point is 400 millimeters. And once I've done that, I can drag this sketch across to where I want it to be. I'm going to let it loosely lie over there. And if I go across to the sketch picture dialog box on the left hand side, I'm going to click on the transparency button, the third one, radio button, and say that I want the transparency to be about 60%, somewhere around there, 65. That's just so that this doesn't get in the way of the sketch. I can see it well enough, and then I say OK, or I can right click and say OK. Okay, so now that it's in place, let me just write this picture so that it's properly done. I'm going to put in a center line, which is like that, and you can see that my underlying picture doesn't line up with that sketch. I just double click on this and drag it across to where I need it to be, and I could drag it so that the origin point is at the base of this this stool top, but that's not what I advise you to do. I think what you've got to do, well, I know what you've got to do, is actually give yourself some space at the bottom, and you'll see why in a little while. Okay, this is because surfaces need extra space. So I'm going to say click to get out of that, and now I'm going to draw directly. I haven't exited the sketch. I'm going to draw directly over this sketch. So go to my commands, 3-point arc. I want the 3-point arc that I start with to line up with that origin point. Click to round about where I want it to end, which is round about there, and you'll see it clicks into place. And I could have done this a slightly different way. In fact, let's just do that. I'm going to delete that line. I'm going to right click, and then I'm going to go to this button which is like a smart mirror button. So I'm going to choose that center line as my axis of symmetry. And once I've chosen it, everything I draw on the left hand side or the right hand side will be repeated on the opposite side. So 3-point arc once again, down to that point to round about here, and the moment I click on this, you see it repeats what I've done on the left on the right. Okay, so I'm going to introduce, while I'm at it, this arc here up to about that apex. It's going to give me a warning message. Don't worry about this. All that means is I've duplicated the arc on both sides. It's not really a problem. It will put it in for you. Okay, so I'm going to dimension the bottom of this arc that I've got in place, 404. Right, and now I want to establish a relationship between that point, and you'll notice as soon as I mouse over on the point, the Solidworks wants to introduce a dimension. So to overcome that, I need to just hit the control button, and then I should be able to, if I zoom in, should be able to select that point. And if I hold the control button, I can click on this other point, and I want to make those horizontal. Okay, so just to make sure that this can't go out of alignment with the base. Right, the next thing I want to do is just make sure that these lines here are tangent, 1, 2, holding the control button to make sure I've got them both selected, and I'm going to then select from the base up to, I'm going to hold the shift button down just so I select the end of that curve. And you'll see that's a fair bit more than my 300, and that's because I've introduced this gap in here. So for now, I'm just going to sort of round it off to what I think it should be. Doesn't matter, whatever you want. It seems to be pretty accurate. But I do now want to mark where that base should be. So I'm going to pull a point in and just pop it in there. Don't worry about the warning symbol. That's just because it seems like I'm introducing 2 points in one place. Go from there, pull that across. Okay, let's say that's 21, which would make 320 round about right. Okay, so I'm not really happy with this curve. I don't think this represents what was in that picture that I saw. So I'm going to make this a fair bit wider. Let's see what happens. Yeah, okay, that's kind of working, except then these are, let's see if we can get this right, these are a little bit too fat, so I need to go down to about 320, see if that'll work. It's looking better. So now it's curving in a little bit here on this edge, but it's still got this feeling of sort of a triangular seat. So I'm going to leave it like that because I want to try and make the video as quick as possible. So I've got a fully defined sketch. I've got this point which is going to possibly be useful later. I'm going to leave it like that. The background sketch was just a guide. So let's hit the escape button and then double click to get out of the sketch. And then I'm just going to go back into 3D mode, and I'm going to select the front plane, which, if you have a look carefully, is actually lined up now with the endpoints of this curve. Okay, so if I just hold the control button down, you can see them both. There they are, they're lined up, which is what I want, because this, in the command I'm going to use, the sketches all need to be joined up. They need to touch one another. So in front plane, I'm going to put a new sketch, and I'm going to do as I did before. I'm going to go to Tools. Okay, wait. I said I was going to show you how to do it this way. So I know what the command is called. It's called Sketch. Is it Sketch Picture? There we go. So I can just click on that, and it'll go straight to the command and go straight into my file folder, and I want the front view, which it'll introduce again with the left hand corner at the 0 position. I'm going to drag this scaling bar to the left hand side, pull the right hand side across to where I want it to be, let go, and it gives me 600. I want it to be 400. It's done it. So that's all that bar does. Don't try and use it for anything else. Don't try and line it up with anything. It's just here to scale the drawing. Once you've got it scaled to the right size, you can just drag it across to where you want it to be. I want it to be roughly there. Okay, and once again, we're going to go to the left-hand side and give this a transparency of about 60%, 70%. That's good enough. Put in a center line downwards this time. As with the last sketch, put in a point that I can reference. Just dimension that straight away from here to there. Probably about 18, doesn't really matter. I'm just going to drag this sketch down. So once I put that in, I can just double click on the sketch and then move it about so that's centered. You can see it's centered around this little funny thing that I created in the sketch, and we're all right. So let's just say OK to that. And so now I can put in this kind of double dip shape. And for that, I'm going to use the style spline, not the ordinary spline, but the style one. Yours will default to Bezier, but they're all Bezier. Sorry, the first one's Bezier, the other ones are B splines. With that degree, we talked about the degree influence in the last lecture. So I'm going to select the first one, and I'm deliberately not going to select the end point of this line, just to show you later how I can adjust this. So I'm going to create my Bezier by using as few points as I need, and then I'm going to click on that point because that marks the apex of that curve there, and I want to make sure that that curve, when I mirror it, is tangent with its opposite. And to make that happen, I can either mirror it and then put the tangent in, or I can do this. I can click on the 2 points and make them horizontal, which that ensures that this curve at the end here, this B-spline, is now tangent, because there's that horizontal line, and if it's going to meet it at a perpendicular, which is what it would have to do, it is tangent. Okay, so let's just right click here, go to mirror entities, select this Bezier, select the center line, say OK, and those two are now mirrored. And I can just, to make sure, I can just put in a tangent line. There we go. So you'll notice that this line, I can't move up or down. I can't move left to right. I can do nothing with it other than I can drag out the endpoints to make this little mound sharper or softer. Alright, so like I've done here, I want a position for this curve, and I'm going to leave this curve, this Bezier curve, I'm going to leave it a little bit deeper than what I've drawn, and that's because I in fact want a little bit more meat on this surface when I make it, so that I can trim it. And I'm going to make this a little bit steeper for the same reason. Okay, and then grab hold of a point and put it in some position which is sort of in the middle, but it's going to mark the lowest point of this curve. So I'm going to put dimensions in from that curve to my origin and say 100, because 400 divided by 4 is 100, so that's roughly in the middle. And then from here to here, 46. Yeah, okay, let's make it 46 and leave it like that. It's good enough. And that's about all I need for now, other than I need to re-establish that point ties in with the sketch as I told you about earlier. So I'm just going to exit 2D mode, go into 3D. I'm going to select the endpoint of this curve, and I'm going to select that other curve, and I'm going to say make pierce, and you'll see it'll connect the two. Okay, so that's essential. You have to make sure that these lines touch for the command that I'm going to use. I'm going to do it to this one just to make sure. There we go, it's done, and so I'm kind of happy with that. I'm going to exit. So now I've got the two primary sketches I need. I need another one down the middle, which helps me to make sure that that sort of centerpiece tapers downwards, and then that I have something else to guide this curve all the way around. So I don't need, for now, I don't need either of these sketch pictures. I'm going to right click, just left click, sorry, and then suppress. You can't hide them, I think. You just have to suppress them. So they've disappeared for now. I can unsuppress them anytime I want. Go to the right plane and introduce a sketch. Okay, my settings immediately put me into 2D view, and I in fact want to go into 3D just because it's a little bit easier. Sorry, I don't need a sketch. I need to go into the splines again and style spline and do something similar to what I did in the previous sketch. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 should do it. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to click on the endpoint, click on that sketch, say make pierce, say OK, do the same on this end, click shift, make pierce, right click, no. Alright, so I just want to control this curve a little bit more. It's going to be easier if I just go into 2D mode, normal 2. Just drag that across. Okay, now I want to put in another point, which is up at the top, somewhere around here, about 2/3 of the way from the left hand side. Click on command on dimension. I want that to go from the origin point down to there by, what did I say, 46? 46 I think is the so I want that to be the same depth as what I'd entered in previously. So it's moved my point to 46 on the curve, and I in fact wanted to do what I want, so I'm going to introduce this horizontal dimension and say, let's say 120 and see what happens. Okay, maybe that's too close. I need to go to 130, 40, 50, 60, about there. Let's call that quits. Let's see what happens. I think these two can be made horizontal. It's actually just pull this point to the wrong side. I can drag it across like that, and I'm going to do the same with this point here. These 2 points, also make them horizontal, and yeah, that's quite neat. So now I've got sort of a little bit of a flat floor here, and I can control that. Drag that dimension out of the way. Right, so yeah, that's good enough. I want to do the same thing here as I did in the other curve and make those horizontal, so I know that this curve, when it meets that point, is tangent to that line. It should come in a little bit. Exit the sketch. Right, so now I've got my 3 curves, sort of a framework, if you will, for creating this surface. So under surfaces you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different kinds of surface. We're not going to go through any but 3 of them, and not in any kind of detail. So this primary one is just a straight extrude. There's not much to understand with that one. But the boundary surface is a little bit more complex, and that's the one we're going to use. So the first thing you'll notice that there are 2 boxes here. One is direction 1 and the other is direction 2. We're going to put these 2 curves, that one there and that one there, in this first box, and we're going to use that second one to control the direction 2. And also in this box you can right click and you can select the selection manager, which I'm not going to select now because you can also right click in your graphics area, and selection manager is also available there. And you'll get this little box here which gives you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 options. The first is standard selection. You don't even need the dialog box for that. The second is a region, which we don't have. You have to have a closed curve for a region, and well, not a closed curve, but you have to have curves that are surrounded on, or a surface which is surrounded on all four sides by curves. Then you've got this one here, which is select group, which allows you to select just one item at a time. And then the open loop, which is what we've got, and then the closed loop, which we don't have, so we can't select it. There's no, you'll see it won't light up. Alright, so I should be able to select closed loop. If that doesn't work, we'll have to go back and just select the select group ones. Okay, so you'll see that nothing appears in this box until you say OK, even though you've selected what you want. And once you've done that, it appears. And so let's do this again. Selection Manager. I'm now going to select this curve, and once I say OK, it appears in the box. And then I'm going to move to direction 2, make sure this is highlighted. Select this item here. It seems to have, it's because I didn't use the Selection Manager, it selected the sketch straight away. So what might happen to you, I'm just going to clear that, what might happen to you is if you right click in here and you say Selection Manager, and then you select this item, you must just remember it's not going to appear in the box until you click OK with the Selection Manager. Then it appears. Alright, and so you can see it's created a very nice surface for us. I'm going to just clear that one now just to show you. Let's go to Curvature Display, which is this little drop down arrow. And you've got 3 modes of displaying other aspects or the sort of interior makeup of this curve. First is Mesh Preview. You can click all 3 of them at the same time if you want. We're not going to go through these, but they're all useful in their own way. So for now, I just want the Mesh Preview. And you can see it's actually given me a pretty decent, equally sided surface. But it does help to go in here and say Selection Manager and select this one. Say OK, because now that's just kind of flattened the floor and given this interior much more definition. It's also tapered this mound off so that you're sort of straddling it when you sit in it. Alright, so once you're happy with that, you're done and you've got your primary surface. It's not 100%. There's some sort of pulling going on here, which might have to do with the severity of that curve. I think you can just drag it. Yeah, you can just click on it and drag it. See what happens if we do that. Yeah, okay. So it's actually a little bit better once you make it gentler. I'm not too worried because I'm actually going to snip some of this off. That's why I made this surface larger than it needs to be. You can see it's sort of dipping in here. Not sure how to correct that at this point. I'll find out and I'll get back to you. Alright, so once I've got this established, I can now put in my side walls. So I'm going to go to the top plane, but I don't really want to use the top plane as my basis, and this is because of the need to chop bits and pieces off. So I'm just going to click and then drag a surface out. So it's a very quick way of getting a parallel surface, and here you've got the dimension box marked. I'm going to put in 5 mil. That's all I need. Okay, I'm going to use that sketch then, that plane to sketch on. And when I'm in here, I want to offset these 3, holding the shift button down. I'm going to offset them by, so let's say 8 millimeters. Just think about that for a second. Is 8 enough? Yeah, it should be. You guys can tweak it if you don't like it. Alright, so while I'm in the sketch, I can create, that's going to become the basis for the outside wall around the 3 sides, but I can also create the sketch which goes across the front, which I'm also going to create like this. So I could use a straight line. I'm going to make my life a bit more difficult and show you how to use a curve instead. So a 3-point curve, something like that, and then my usual establish relationships straight away. I think this should become a habit with you. Just as you go, establish relationships. So I want a center line. I want to make sure that those three or those two are symmetrical. There we go. And I want to make sure that I'm going to hold the shift button down and make sure that that there is, so about 13 should be okay. And I want to control the end of this curve, which I could actually control how this curve looks by putting a radius in, but this is probably just easier for now. And then lastly, I want the width of that, make it about 450. Okay, so as long as everything cuts over everything else, because those are going to become, if you can picture that these lines are going to become surfaces, which are then going to need to trim away those surfaces at the end. So once that's done, it's fully defined, I can exit. Let's just click on this plane and hide it. Right, so you can see that my sketch is beneath the top of that surface. So I can then, you can select the whole sketch, just select it here, and I can say extrude surface, and you'll see it's actually selected all three of them, and it's gone upwards by 10 millimeters. So I'm going to leave it going upwards because I want it to go downwards as well, because I want it to extend in both directions. So let's make this, what should we make it? So about 65. Should be good. You can always trim it if we don't like it. And here, if you knew that you were going to make this into a plastic part, you could introduce a taper. And let's just say 3, draft outwards is what you'd want to do. So you can see the tapers in there. You could do that. That would save you some time and some effort. So I don't want to do that because I'm going to assume you're just copying what the wood one looks like. And then I can go to the selected contours, and instead of selecting the sketch, I can select the region inside. So now, instead of giving us those extra bits and pieces, which I don't need now, I can just, that's it, I'll just grab the outer ones. Right, so there the outer walls are of our seat, and this sort of dished part on the inside. We just need to cap this bit and the base, and then trim everything. Okay, so there might be a little bit of a discontinuity there because I had to just adjust something that I thought I understood, or did understood, but it made a mistake. It was quite a lengthy mistake. So let's just go to I think where I left off. I need to now close the gap between there and there. So I'm going to go to where's that surface? It's this plane here, because it's in the right place, and I'm going to create a new sketch on there. I can't reuse any of the sketches because I need to in fact make this plane, which I'm going to create, larger than these other ones. So I'm going to click on this and say offset. Right, 8 millimeters. That's okay, I can do that. Make sure that I've selected all of the edges, all of the curves, right, and let's join them up. That should be alright. And then from here I should be able to select surfaces directly. Planar surface will do it, I think. Yeah, there we go. And it's actually inserted this planar surface exactly as I want. I may even be able to do something like, no, can't. Okay, forget that idea. It's going to try and control drag it down. So I'm just going to fill in this bottom surface. I'm going to select the 4 edges, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's just a quicker way of doing things. And then go to filled surface. So I could have selected filled surface first, but it's just easier to select the edges first. So it's going to fill that in. You can see it's kind of turned green. If yours doesn't turn green, make sure that this button fix up boundary. It's not actually affecting it in this case. Okay, but If it doesn't work, just make sure that that button is selected. So now I've got all the surfaces I need. All I need to do is trim them, and then I need to knit them together and then put the edge fillets on. So I'm going to go to trim surface. I'm not going to use the standard one, so yours might default to standard. Make sure it's you select mutual, and then the surfaces radio button or the dialog box will highlight. I'm going to left drag and select all my surfaces, even though this one here is not going to feature in what I do. So your command might be defaulting to keep selections, which you can do, but it's very hard to find the selections that you want. Or it's a lot easier just to go to remove selections, because I can select from the outside, and if you click on that, make sure that this button is highlighted before you try and select. So here I should be able to select. Let's hope that works. Yes, and that outside one. Alright, so 1, 2, 3. Do I have something weird happening here? No, I don't. That little wall. So this can get quite tricky, because the figuring out what to keep and what not to keep. But you can always backtrack. Get rid of all of those. Get rid of this front face. Get rid of that little one there. And that seems to have done it. So if I click on OK, right, so I've got all my surfaces, but they're not joined. They're separate. And so all I need to do now is select knit surface, or I can sort of select everything and then hit knit surface. Let's do it the other way around. Selections, I'm going to do this. And there are two buttons that you have underneath here. One is create solid, the other one is merge entities. I'm going to click on merge entities and just show you what that does. So that puts it all together, but it leaves it as an empty space. So if I go to the section view and I section this, you'll see that it's empty inside. There's nothing there. Okay, right, so empty. So let's go back to this and instead select solid. You can select them both, but you don't need to. And if I now, there we go, you can see that that is now a solid. So wherever I've put the section in, it's a solid section. Alright, so you're basically done. Just to let you know that now that all your sketches are in place, say you wanted to alter the height of this. 65 is too much. You can just type in 60. Just always, I like to regenerate the model from here just to make sure it's the dimension I want. Say, yeah, okay, I'm happy with that. And you can do that with any of those dimensions. That's the beauty of fully constraining your sketches and putting the dimensions in. You can just drive the changes as you go. So the last thing now to do is to put in the fillets. I'm going to start with these edge ones. So all that remains is to put in my fillets. I'm going to select these two because they're going to be the largest. So the general rule is to go from largest to smallest fillet. And you'll see yours might have defaulted to the variable fillet size. You need to just watch that. I'm going to go to the standard fillet and type in 35 because I've checked out that works already. Say OK. And here you need to be careful, because if you're going to try and fillet across this point, it's not it's not going to be an easy thing to do, or maybe impossible. So I need to make sure that that edge there gets filleted before I try and fillet across it, so that it's got a smooth transition. So go to fillet, type in 8, somewhere around there. 8's good. Okay, and then I want to put in a variable fillet over here. So it's gone straight to the last command, and I want to change it to variable fillet. And here you'll see that it's only selected this edge. If I want these other edges, I must select them. But before I do that, while I've got that edge selected, I've got these points, which I can change the number of points somewhere here as well. Remember where it is. Here we go. In number of instances, you can say 6, and it'll put 6 in. But for now, I just need 3. This center one, if I click on it, I can just double click in the unassigned button and click in what I want. So I'm going to make that 6, and then these 2 center ones I'm going to make a fair bit larger, say 13. And then on the edge, you'll see anytime you have inputted a dimension in it, it gives you an unassigned indication. So let's make that 7, and this one as well, 7. Right, and now I want to make the transition happen between that point, and likewise on the other side. So I need to select this edge, and you'll see as soon as I do that, it gives me once again the number of transition points. So if you want to get, want to be able to change these transition points, you need to have selected the edge that has them. So I'm going to go to the middle one, this button over here. I'm going to make that about 4. Let's make that 4, and the end one, which is unassigned, I'm going to make 2. Because that's going to go all the way around the edge. Okay, it's gone. It's gone a bit quiet. Why is that? Well, let's see. Let's move on to this other edge and see if we can get something similar going. So, middle one, I'm going to double click, say 4. Edge 1, 2. So okay, that's the reason why this one here went, suddenly you couldn't have a preview, is because it had picked up that this dimension here, 7, was going to go all the way around, and that was going to be a problem across this little edge here. Okay, so that I'm going to leave it as that, and so you can see that this sort of indicates that someone's been sitting on this chair and it's worn away more on those edges. And that about does it for now. So I will see you all on Wednesday, and happy modeling. Cheers.